Hey there, it's Lara back with your weekly astrology forecast. This one's for the week of May 12th to the 18th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So, before I say anything else, I just want to say thanks to the folks that heard me talking in the last couple of weeks about how I'm preparing to launch a new website. And I told you how you could go over there and get on the list so that you find out when that's happening. And you can also grab my free guide to working with the moon. And even if you already have that, get on the list because there's lots coming down the pipeline. Big changes over here. And so I'm excited to share that with you when the time comes. So you'll find me at astrologymaven.com. All right. And I'll put the link to that below. So the next thing I'm going to mention to you is that I focused on Jupiter and Pisces in a video a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to put the link to that below as well, because that's coming up this week. But I wanted to give you a heads up about it. So I did it a little while back. I'm going to talk about it briefly again this week because it is happening on Thursday. And this Pisces sun, Virgo rising, is pretty excited about that. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. But if you want to know what house that is falling in for you specifically, go listen to to the video about that. And like I said, I'll put the link below. So what we're going to focus on today, though, is some Gemini, because we've got a lot of action going on in the Gemini area of the chart for the next little while. And we have Mercury and Venus in there. They're going to meet up actually next week, I think, but they're both in there and the sun is going to join them. We've got eclipses happening because the nodes of the moon are in Gemini and Sagittarius. So a whole lot of stuff is going on in the Gemini area of our chart. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And speaking of that, in terms of where the moon is at, the moon is actually entering Gemini, or entered Gemini this morning, Wednesday, depending on when you're watching this, right? And then, so what I want to say about that is pay attention. Pay attention to when the moon moves into Gemini, or if you're listening to this at a time when, that's already happened, then think back, when the moon entered Gemini, what kind of came into my awareness? What came into my experience? Because that will tweak you to where, the themes that Gemini encompasses in your own chart and what you might be dealing with more of over the next month or so. And even beyond, because the eclipses are not finished with us quite yet. But so the moon is in Gemini, and then on Friday, it will move into Cancer. And on Monday the 17th, it will move on into Leo. So, which is the same day, if I recall, I have it down here somewhere, that the nodes, let me see here. Yeah, we've got, I think it's Venus meeting up with the nodes in Gemini, yeah, on the same day as the moon moves into Leo. So, but we'll get to that. So first thing, let's talk a little bit more about Jupiter in Pisces, because this is, I don't want to oversell it. I really don't. But it's been like, because it's not a panacea, right? Jupiter moving into Pisces is not going to cure everything that ails us. But it is certainly a welcome shift, because Jupiter is kind of getting the hell out of Dodge for a while, right? Meaning that it's getting out of Saturn territory where it's been since 2019, because it went into first Capricorn in late 2019, and then, moved into Aquarius at the end of 2020 and has been in Aquarius. And both Capricorn and Aquarius are Saturn ruled signs. Of course, in modern times, we modern astrologers think of Uranus as being the ruler of Aquarius. I'm sort of in the camp that acknowledges both, but I think that the significance of the traditional rulers is quite important. So all that to say, you know, Jupiter has been a guest in Saturn's houses for the last couple of years, and it's not comfortable there. Jupiter can't do Jupiter's job very well when it's in Saturn's houses, because Saturn is, you know, just wants Jupiter to follow the rules and, you know, makes things a little bit difficult. So, and Jupiter is that, you know, it's the great benefic that is associated with luck and abundance and prosperity and you know, optimism and joy and growth and expansion. So all of these things, you know, have been a bit of a downer in many ways when Jupiter's been in Saturn's homes. So that's why it's really exciting to see this shift coming, Jupiter moving into one of its home signs of Pisces. The other one is Sagittarius, right? And so Jupiter's going home, like I was saying, and I think maybe last week's video or the video specifically on Jupiter and Pisces, that, you know, Jupiter gets to go home for a while and finally relax and finally be able to take care of some Jupiter business, without being encumbered by, you know, without being in the grips of Saturn, without being under Saturn's thumb. So this is welcome news. And like I said, it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all for everything. And it will have an impact, you know, on a personal level, more for some folks than others, but we will see its impact in general, you know, in what's going on in the world. Keeping in mind the caveat, you know, there's always a but to keep in mind. And that in this case is that Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So be careful what you wish for, you know, put your attention on things that you want to grow, rather than on things like, you don't want things like, you know, debt, for example, getting out of control during this time. So that's just, it's important to be mindful of that. Generally really, really good though. So Jupiter is moving into Pisces on May 13th. I'm talking Northern Hemisphere here. I don't actually have, if I take a look, I can tell you exactly what time. 6:35 p.m. Eastern time. So take note, right? Take note of the shift in energy and see what happens in your own life or in the world as Jupiter moves into Pisces. Now, Jupiter is only going to move through the first couple of degrees. So if you're fortunate enough to have, you know, some important placements around the first couple of degrees of Pisces, you're going to notice this for sure. So if you have your sun, your moon, your rising sign, you know, one of your personal planets, a stellium that's clustered around the first couple of degrees of Pisces, or even the other three mutable signs, which are Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini. If you have things clustered around the beginning of those signs, you're likely to notice this on a more personal level before Jupiter retrogrades back into Aquarius, is my point. So, which is going to happen on the 20th of June. Jupiter will station retrograde in Pisces. And then it will slowly start to make its way back into Aquarius, and it'll re-enter Aquarius on the 28th of July and stay there until, well, it'll station direct October 18th and start moving forward. And then by December 28th of this year of 2021, Jupiter re-enters Pisces, and it will be there until, at first I was thinking, oh, Jupiter's in Pisces all of 2022, but it's technically not. It's there until May. And then it's going to dip into Aries for about 5 months in 2022. And then it'll re-enter Pisces again in the fall of 2022. So it's kind of doing this back and forth thing. But really take note of what's happening between May, the evening sort of May 13th. I'm talking Eastern time, and until the end of July. So like I said, July 28th, it re-enters Aquarius. So take note of what's going on for you, or just in the wider world. And, in terms of those Jupiterian qualities that I mentioned. And you have more of that to look forward to. So, and I just want to give you something to work with here. I took a look at when Jupiter was last in Pisces, because Jupiter takes about 12 years to circle the whole zodiac, right? And so the last time Jupiter, I'm going to give you a few dates, was in Pisces. So I'm going to go take it back to the 80s for those of us that are of a certain vintage. So, I mean, of course we could go further than that, but I thought we'll go that far. So February 20th, 1986, Jupiter entered Pisces until March 1st, 1987. And then February 4th, 1998, to February 11th, 1999, Jupiter was in Pisces. And then the last time Jupiter was in Pisces was January 17th, 2010 to January 22nd, 2011, with a kind of a similar situation that we're in now, where it dipped into Aries, then came back into Pisces. So you can take a look at those dates and think about what was going on for me at that time, right? Particularly in relation to the house that Pisces sits for you. And I went into that specifically in that Jupiter and Pisces video that I'll link to below. Okay. Moving on from Jupiter now. And please, let me know. I would love to know in the comments below if you notice a shift in energy, if anything happens for you, as Jupiter moves into Pisces. If you're somebody that has placements in early Pisces and how that impacts you, I'd really love to know that. So put it in the comments below. Okay, next we've got... Oh, actually, while I'm thinking about that, if you don't know that, where does Jupiter sit in my chart, or, what am I even talking about, then you can, by all means, connect with me for a reading. And until I get my website out, the best place to do that is you can message me on Facebook or Instagram, and the links to those are always below. Or you can email me at lara@astrologymaven.com, and I'll put that below as well. Okay. And that's until, when the website gets up, then I'll send you there. And of course, if you're more of a sort of a DIYer, do-it-yourselfer, then there are places you can go online to drop a free birth chart. You just need your birth details, right? You need your date of birth, your place of birth, and your time of birth, ideally, to drop an accurate birth chart. And you can do that on astro.com, astroseek.com. There's various places. So, okay. Where were we here? Right. I wanted to talk about the fact that there's a lot going on in Gemini, and specifically that Mercury and Venus are moving through Gemini over the next little while. So Mercury actually entered Gemini on May 3rd, and it remains there until July 11th when it enters Cancer. And it's there for, a bit of an extended stay because it will retrograde in Gemini. And Mercury is actually at home in Gemini, right? Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. And so when Mercury is in one of its home signs, it's stronger. Any planet in a home sign is stronger. It's more true to form, true to nature. It can do its job efficiently, effectively, those kinds of things. And so even though Mercury is retrograding in Gemini, we often think about Mercury retrograde as something that not to look forward to, although I don't see it that way personally. And I'm a Mercury ruled sign. I'm a Virgo rising. I've come to appreciate Mercury retrogrades for what they are intended, which is to allow us to hit the pause button in whatever area particularly that Mercury is moving through at the retrograde, and to revisit and revise and redo things and reflect and, really make sure that the details are covered, to give us an opportunity to go over that ground and really, really get things right as a Virgo rising. I love that. So anyway, but Mercury retrograde in Gemini, it's kind of not so bad. Of course, it all depends on what's going on personally for in a person's chart. But in general, not so bad because Mercury's at home. And so, it really has strength there and it has the tools it needs. So Mercury in Gemini for an extended time. And Mercury is now the evening star, which means that Mercury can be seen in the evening sky as well as Venus, right? Venus is also an evening star right now. And they will come into a conjunction later on in May. Did I write that down in my notes? Yeah, May 22nd, May 21st, 22nd, Mercury and Venus will conjunct, and you'll be able to see that in the evening sky if there's no clouds where you are. So Mercury, it stays in a sign anywhere from a couple of weeks, like 15 days to 60 days, depending on how quickly it's moving, and the retrogrades. So that's why it varies, because of the retrograde cycles. But the thing to note about Mercury and about Venus is that they are never more than 2 signs away from the sun at any given time. So when a planet's can only ever be 2 signs away, that means it can only make certain aspects, right? A sextile, which is an aspect of opportunity and helpfulness, and a conjunction with the sun. So I'm talking about the sun specifically here, but so I was saying Mercury can be in a sign for anywhere from 15 to 60 days, and Venus stays in a sign anywhere from 23 days to a couple of months, right? Depending on the sign. So both of those 2 planets are never, as I was saying, more than 2 signs away from the sun. So they only make certain aspects to the sun. But because Mercury is doing this retrograde, it's spending an extended stay in Gemini this time. And so Mercury and Venus are hanging out for a while. And at a point, Venus will overtake Mercury because Venus will actually be moving faster than Mercury, which only happens because Mercury is stationing retrograde. So even though Venus has moved out of Taurus where it was exalted, and moved into Gemini where it doesn't have any particular dignity. So it's okay there, it's not really bad and it's not really good. It's average. But because it's in Mercury sign and it's kind of gaining on Mercury, there's a little extra, help there, a little extra oomph for Venus in Gemini than there may normally be. So May 8th, Venus entered Gemini. And so at the time of this recording, both Mercury and Venus are in Gemini, and Venus will stay there until June 2nd. So we have, let's talk a little bit about that combination first before I go into some other things that are happening in Gemini. So Mercury is the messenger, right? The wing-footed messenger, the guide of souls. So Mercury is the god who was able to move between the worlds, the only one that could shift easily between the worlds. and would guide souls to, the underworld, and has that capacity to really be a sort of a shapeshifter in a sense. Mercury is, Mercury's the moving parts. It is our mental faculties. It's our neural pathways. It's the information gathered and exchanged back and forth. It's social engagement. It's ideas on paper. It's, verbal banter. It's the back and forth that we do on the day to day in our sort of immediate environment, right? So this is Mercury, and Venus is the goddess of love and beauty and aesthetic and relationship of all kinds, of resources, of art, all of those themes. So Venus in Gemini, when I was thinking about, how can I best explain Venus in Gemini? Venus in Gemini is like the hostess with the mostess. You know that saying, right? So you go to somebody's house for a party and the person just knows how to make you comfortable, knows what to say, knows how to keep the conversation flowing, is really good at, social lubrication kind of thing. And that is Venus in Gemini. The smooth talker. Venus in Gemini is like the perfect finishing touches that we put onto our projects, if you're working on some kind of written project, or a website or an album or a contract of some description, or a speech, or that you have to deliver some kind of talk, some kind of online communication, a deal that needs to be made, a purchase of some kind of of a new car or technology, or, there can be some real good mojo there going on. So, and like I was saying, although Venus has no special dignity in Gemini, it is co-present with the host of Gemini, right? Mercury at the time. And so it makes it more comfortable to stay there because Mercury is there taking care of things. And so these two energies are blending really nicely at this time. And if you happen to be a Mercury or a Venus ruled sign, right? So Virgo, Gemini, Libra, or Taurus, then this can be quite nice, quite noticeable by you in particular, if you have a lot going on, right? In one of those signs. So that's a little bit about the combination of Venus and Mercury in Gemini. And I want you to really sit with that. Because, of late I've been going through a list of questions for you to consider in terms of whatever it is that I'm talking about, whether it's the new moon, the full moon, whatever aspect, right? And today I was thinking about this quite a bit, and I really have like essentially one big question for you, right? And it has to do with how those energies blend. So stay tuned for that in a second. But all right, so where was I here? So Venus and Mercury are in Gemini, and then on Monday the 17th, I sort of touched on this earlier, but Venus will come into a conjunction with the North Node in Gemini. And so the North Node speaks to our collective trajectory, right? The transiting North Node, where the North Node is in our birth chart, specifically speaks to our personal kind of trajectory. But when we're talking collectively here, it's where, where the North Node goes, so too does our attention kind of thing. And we are being asked to grow in some capacity in relation to the North Node placement. and to kind of move away from or release the, something that has to do with the South Node, which in this case is in Sagittarius. So we're being led more towards the Mercurial realm, right? In terms of like Gemini, the Gemini themes of information, questioning, curiosity, finding out like the details and I mean, there's been so much information, right? I've spoken about this in past videos with the North Node in Gemini. It's been information overload. And it's been our job to kind of weed through all that and be, like try to figure out, what's important to us, and what pieces of information should we keep and what should we discard. What, there's been a lot of information sharing, and different ways that people are getting their information, that kind of thing. And it's been a real challenge to our sort of concepts and our ideas about things, I think, for a lot of us as well, as the North Node's been in Gemini. So Venus is coming into this conjunction on the 17th. And so it's like there can be some sort of like a pleasant bit of news or pleasant exchange, in terms of relationship, contract, something revolving around your resources, something revolving around beautification of, not only like when I'm talking about like beauty and aesthetic in this regard, when Venus is in Gemini, like, sure, it could pertain to you personally, but like the beautification of things like I was saying, anything having to do with words and information and technology and moving parts, ideas, thoughts, social exchanges, those sorts of things. So, you can take note of that, as that happens. And then on the 29th of May, later in the month, that's when Mercury will retrograde in Gemini. So between May 29th and the 22nd of June, Mercury is going to retrograde between the 24 and 16 degree of Gemini mark. So that particular area of the chart, if you have placements around there, are really, it's getting like a workover, like something in the Gemini house for you, but particularly around those degrees, if you have personal placements around those 24 to 16 degrees, 16 to 24, really wants to be like, pay attention to the details, cross the T's and dot the I's, review, reflect, rehash, all of revise, revitalize, all of those words, that area of life. And so that's the retrograde. And then the sun's going to enter Gemini on the 20th of May as well. So an extra, boost of energy, that solar energy entering the Gemini house as well for a month or so. And then on the 26th, we've got an eclipse in Sagittarius, which is Gemini's opposite sign. So whatever happens in the opposite sign has an impact, right? So this eclipse cycle has been in Gemini and Sagittarius since May of 2020. So May 5th, 2020, the North Node entered Gemini, and it's there until January 2022 when it will move into Taurus. And so during these 18 months with the North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius, the eclipses happen on that axis, the Gemini Sagittarius axis. So that, the that axis, and we're talking specifically about Gemini right now because that's what we're focusing on in this video, is really getting, like, eclipses tend to bring about major changes, you know, and shifts and reimagining, if you will, changes in directions, big, you know, reversals. These kinds of things can happen. And so, pay attention, you know, I mean, and this is nothing new because this eclipse cycle is coming to a close. And I'm not sure if I know I didn't write that down. I think if I'm remembering correctly, yeah, it's the end of this year. We will see, so in December, you know, around eclipse season, we will see the end of this cycle of eclipses that's happening in Gemini and Sagittarius. So this eclipse is coming on the 26th, is an eclipse in Sagittarius, and then there will be one in Gemini on June 10th as well, because they come in pairs like that. So you can see all of this to illustrate that there is a shit ton of stuff going on in Gemini. So really, really something to be paying attention to. And, you know, if you're just somebody who is like learning astrology and a lot of this sounds like gobbledygook to you, then like just know that it'll come. I swear to you, it will. Like, I remember when this all sounded like I had no idea, like somebody was speaking a different language. But it'll come. It'll come. And so even if a lot of what I'm saying doesn't make sense right now, eventually it will. But an important thing to notice is when I'm saying to you, you know, Jupiter's moving into Pisces on May 13th, and I'm giving you the dates, just like you can even keep a little journal, and just take note, right? And I give you the house, the areas, the life themes that's happening for you. Take note of what's going on. Like, that's really how you learn. That's one of the reasons, like I've mentioned before, why I think it's a real important thing to pay attention to where the moon is at, and it's very helpful. And it's particularly helpful if you're somebody who's just kind of starting to get a feel for these things and how what goes on in the sky, you know, directly reflects life here on Earth, you know, and vice versa, I guess. There is a correlation. There is no question that there is a correlation between those two things. You know, I'm going to digress here for a second. I had somebody that I know and I respect their intelligence very much posted something on Facebook about, you know, like this long list of things that are nonsense, essentially. And astrology was on the list, among other things. And like I had to say something, right? And the thing is like I appreciate that perspective because, and I don't really blame this person for that perspective, because astrology has gotten such a bad rap because we don't, or the average person doesn't really understand how complicated, what an intellectual pursuit astrology is. Like, it is not just about, you know, sun sign horoscopes that we read in magazines and the newspaper. It's not about the funny memes that come across our Instagram feed. Although, you know, I have no issue with that, but take it with a grain of salt and understand that there is so much more to it than that. It's a tradition, a wisdom tradition that's been around for thousands of years. And, you know, there were like points in history where like you couldn't be a doctor if you didn't know astrology. You know, it was really, really an important subject. It was taught in universities. So, and unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, over time, it has been really denigrated to, pseudoscience and that kind of thing. And it's a shame. And there's a lot of people that are trying to, sort of revitalize the study and to make it what it once was, a real sort of academic intellectual pursuit. But also, like, part of my thing is to make it sort of more relatable to people that don't necessarily have a background, or even, they may be curious but skeptical. I mean, I think that's totally fine. And so anyways, I mentioned to this person a couple of books that they might want to, because this person's very academic. So I mentioned a couple books, one being Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche, and then the other one being Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology, the Study of Fate and Fortune. Anybody who thinks astrology is nonsense, well, I dare you to read those books and still have that opinion. So I digress, but I just, I wanted to, I just wanted to bring that up. And like, circling back to my, what led me to that is that if you're not understanding what I'm talking about, like, be patient with yourself. Take the tidbits that work for you and pay attention to those transits. Like, where is the moon at? And if you download my free guide to working with the moon, that you can get, at the astrologymaven.com link below, then that will help you get started with that. Pay attention to, okay, Lara's telling me, or whoever telling me, Mercury and Venus are in Gemini. This is an area that's going to see this kind of energy. Like, what's going on for me? Pay attention. Write it down. And actually, on that subject, if you're looking for a really helpful little tool, I would really recommend I'm going to show you this. This is my copy of the Honeycomb Collective. Makes these personal almanacs. Sorry, the ring lights are doing weird things. And so, and like, no, I don't get paid for telling you this. They don't have an affiliate program, although I wish they did, because I'd be all over that. Because I discovered this tool only about, I don't know, a year ago. And honestly, like, where have you been all my life? If you're learning astrology, or even if you are well-versed, I really, I can't say enough good things about it. It will help you keep track of the transits. There's spaces if you want, like, you can customize for whatever you want. If you want to keep it super simple, you can do that. If you want to have, like, all the asteroids in there, if you want to have, all the Hellenistic Time Lord techniques, you can do that, or you can keep it super simple. So that's a tool that I really recommend. Or any kind of, you can buy a lot of, like, Llewellyn sells, almanacs that even show you, like, they'll even just show you where the moon is at. And anything like that is kind of helpful. There's places online, there's apps you can download to just get a sense of, like, okay, this is what's going on. How does that feel for me, right? So, all right. Wow, did I ever go on a tangent there? Sorry if that was boring for you, but Gemini, chatty, lots of Gemini stuff. And Gemini happens to be my 10th house, which is the house that has to do with, your public sort of persona and your career and your, legacy and your sense of authority and all of that stuff. So I have a lot to say to you. All right. So remember how I said to you that I was going to give you one major question to focus on this time in relation to particularly what's happening with Venus and Mercury moving through Gemini. And that question is, if you want to write it down, or you can come back, I'll put a timestamp, is how can I personally combine the qualities of Venus and Mercury to make the most of this transit, particularly as it relates to the Gemini house in my chart, right? So we talked about the qualities of Venus and Mercury. We talked about what this looks like as a blend of energies. And next, we're going to go through the houses and speak to what house does Gemini sit for you and what life themes are being stirred up by all this Gemini energy, right? And so this can bring things like, you can use this energy for things like softening the blow if you have some difficult information to relay or a tough message, or a difficult conversation that needs to be had. This can be great for negotiating contracts. I mentioned some of these things already, but smoothing over communications in general, for beautifying, a tech space. So that whether that be a website, I'm personally using this for that. Or just finessing anything that has to do with words or language or information. Technology, moving parts, like I was saying. And we'll get more into the specifics for each sign. So what I'm going to do now is go through each sign, and we're talking first and foremost in these general forecast videos for rising sign first. Okay, that's what you listen to first. If you know your rising sign or your ascendant, listen to that first. It generally tends to be more relevant, in terms of, and what I mean by that is more indicative of your actual life experience, And then you can also listen for your sun sign and your moon sign. And those can give you some added layers of information, right? But your rising sign first and foremost, and you need a fairly accurate birth time to know your rising sign. If you don't know that, there's ways that you can get it. And if you can't get the information from, a parent or family member or health records or hospital records or records from your midwife or whatever, then there are astrologers who specialize in something called chart rectification. I'm not one of them at this point, but that can help you with that. I do, if I do a reading for somebody that doesn't know a birth time or just has kind of a wide range, then I spend time playing with the chart a little bit, and I give them the different, if you were born between such and such a time and such a time, then you are a Aries rising. If you were born between, then you are, Taurus rising, for example. So I will do that, and it's helpful, when you don't have anything else to go on, just because the person can then get a sense of what resonates with them best. But if you do know your birth time, then that is ideal. So rising sign first and foremost, and then sun and moon as well, that can give you some added layers of information. If you know the charts of people close to you, like significant other or your kids, this can be really interesting to have a listen for their signs as well, and what they may be going through, at any given, if you're looking at a full moon or a new moon or some significant, where's Jupiter moving into, for if you're somebody that has kids, where might they see a little bit of optimism and growth and expansion, or your spouse or something like that. So, all right, let's begin. We're going to, in this situation, we're going to start off with Gemini because it's Gemini. And all of this energy of Mercury and Venus and the Mercury retrograde and the North Node and Venus conjunct the North Node, and eclipses and the sun moving in to Gemini, and even the moon moving into Gemini, over the next these couple of days, is all happening in your first house if you are a Gemini rising. If you're a Gemini sun, it's happening in your sun sign, and so that's also significant. I don't know what house that, if you're Gemini sun, I don't necessarily know what what house that is for you. I'd have to see your chart. But if you're Gemini rising, this is happening in your first house. And so, like, so much focus and attention on the self, on your relationship to yourself, on your physical vitality, your potentially your physical appearance, your how you come at the world, how you express yourself to the world, how the world perceives you. These are all first house themes. The first house is very significant. It's kind of, the foundation for everything else. And it's how it's, where we come into the world, right? The first house indicates whatever sign, the ascendant is in there, indicates that the sign that was on the horizon, the eastern horizon, at the moment we were born. And so that's significant, right? It's like we made our entrance into the world. And so that's based on first house. So that's a big deal. And so for you, this may be, it could encompass pretty much any of the things that I mentioned already in the video. It can be, well, one of the things that strikes me about this, potentially for a Gemini rising, is your relationship to yourself and your self-talk even. This could undergo a transition, and really it's a really good time to be working on that for yourself. That internal dialogue that goes on, your thought patterns, your way of communicating with yourself, but even, communicating out to the world as well. You could be in a position where you are, maybe appreciating your ability to communicate more. There can be harmonious sort of communications, ideas, thoughts that revolve around your physical body in some way, your physical appearance, your physical vitality. So I'm trying to think if there's any other specific examples that I could give you, Gemini. You could potentially be recognized for your ability to be the smooth talker, the hostess with the mostess sort of thing, like we were talking about, having a way with words. That could be something that you are, recognized for around this time. But with the eclipses happening in your sign, and you're going to have one on June 10th in your sign, then there's some big shifts and changes happening here on your axis of relationship and relating to others, right? The relationship you have to yourself, the relationship you have to others, which is the Sagittarius house across the sky from you. So there's something going on there that is really like shifting in a big way. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that there for you, Gemini, and I'm going to move on to Taurus, where Taurus, you've got this energy playing out in your second house. So blending the Venus and Mercury energies in some way to really, smooth things over, to maybe you get a sweet deal, you know, in terms of your resources and your personal resources. So this is your money, very much so your money, your finances, you know, the money you make from your skills and talents, your material possessions, what you value, you know, how you value yourself, your self-worth, your, like how you sustain yourself, that sense of sort of self-sufficiency, right? Which we, like when we make our own money, when we have our own money in this day and age, it allows us to feel more self-sufficient. But that can also come about in other ways too, where we're talking about things like growing our own food, right? Which has to, you know, that increases our food security, for example. So those are second house themes that are really, really being highlighted for you over this time, as we have all this activity going on in Gemini. And there is an opportunity to really make the most of this by blending that Mercury, Venus, you know, sweet talker kind of energy, if you will. And so I'm thinking like you could this could be a way of like finessing your, like a conversation about a raise, for example. It could be a good time to have that conversation, right? About a raise at work. Sorry, I have a hair that is really distracting me, and I apologize. I don't do multiple takes. I don't edit videos. I don't have time for that because I'm a one-person show. I admire those people that do, but I'm not there yet. And so, you know, be patient. This is what you see is what you get. So if I'm picking hair out of my mouth, I'm not editing that out. It's just, and I'm not starting over. So that's the way it is. Anyway, Taurus, for you, you know, like I was saying, it could be a good time for like negotiating a raise. It could be a good time for asking for what you're worth or what you feel you're worth. It could be, sorry. This hair is driving me nuts. There we go. I got it. That's gross. I apologize. But it could be like you maybe needing to negotiate some sort of a contract. And it could be a good time to do that. There could be a lot of conversation, like something going on in your work that revolves around resources and communications, beauty. For some reason, I keep thinking of like a makeup artist in the movie industry, and I don't know why that's coming to mind. But you know, that is really good at their job. And not only like because they do the makeup well, but also they make people feel comfortable. It's like that kind of an energy. And so, you know, it's like you know, they're not afraid to ask for what they're worth, sort of thing. This could be like, it could be a nice time for thinking about how, even like how the food you eat and potentially grow impacts, you know, your your social life, your like your communications in some way. Like I'm thinking about like making money from like publishing a cookbook or some kind of gardening blog, or growing food that's really quite like aesthetically pleasing in some way. And I think about like going to the farmer's market, and you always want to like somebody that has a really nice stand that's displaying things nicely, and their produce looks really nice and healthy and well cared for. That tends to be what draws your attention, right? So it's got that vibe to it, this Mercury Venus, like beautifying the marketplace, or that kind of thing, which can lead to more resources for you. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that sounds a little weird, but I try to kind of grab things that some people may be dealing with, but of course not everyone's going to be in that position. But just to give you a variety to kind of give you a sense of what this is about. So, but it's the second house themes of your personal resources, your money, your time and your energy as well, and your worth and what you value, that is being triggered by this Gemini Palooza sort of thing. So, okay, we're going to move on to Aries now. Aries, for you, all this Gemini energy is in your third house this next while. So that is what's really pulling focus, right? Mercury and Venus coming together there, the North Node there, the eclipse is happening on that axis, the sun entering Gemini later on the 20th. So there's a lot going on in your third house. This has to do with your immediate environment. It has to do with teaching and learning, generally of the early learning environment. So anything up to high school or anything you're learning that's sort of the foundation or the basics. It has to do with, this is the house of Mercury. So it's like the back and forth that goes on, sometimes the short distance trips or the daily commute. It's the busy marketplace. It's the, it's commerce. It's anything that's sort of like quickly moving and exchanged. It's the house also of siblings and peers and cousins and, those folks that are kind of on the same level as us. So those are the themes that are being triggered, right? So this can be so many things. I'm having a hard time pulling specific examples because there's just so many things. But so it's like, okay, let's think here. This can be pleasant conversation with siblings, a reconciliation potentially with siblings, some changes that are happening there in terms of your relationship to your siblings or your cousins or peers, teammates, that kind of thing. I can see this as like even going into business with somebody, like that, one of those people that fits into that category. This is writing projects and advertising and that kind of thing that there's a real potential here for making that quite attractive and aesthetically pleasing, and being, giving it that like smooth talking touch kind of thing. If you're working on some kind of a project like that, this could be, I can see this even as being like a bit of a like weekend retreats for writing or something like that that are really pleasant. Being introduced to somebody to like a potential, love interest or other kind of partnership through a sibling or a cousin or a neighbor, or through a teaching environment or a learning environment of some description. So I think that gives you some idea, but it is those themes of, peers, siblings, cousins, neighbors, your community, short sort of travel, teaching and learning, early learning, commerce. Those are all themes that are being triggered with this Gemini energy. So that's for you, Aries. We're going to move on to Pisces now, where you have all of this Gemini palooza happening in your 4th house, which has to do with your family, and your family of origin, your place of living, like literally, your home, real estate. It has to do with your sense of emotional security. It has to do with mother figures in your life. So for you, Pisces, this can be pleasant interactions and conversations with people that fit into that, sort of mothers or mother-like figures. This can have to do with, like, maybe you're remortgaging your house, for example, because you want to do a reno or something like that, or for whatever reason. And so this is a good time to be negotiating, right? You can just know the right things to say, and it can be quite pleasant, and it can feel good. So, or anything revolving around your home, like maybe if you're moving, this can be, you've found the perfect real estate agent, and that makes things really easy for you. The contract kind of, it all goes smoothly. This can be pleasant family dynamics, conversations that are really, that flow nicely. A lot of conversations with women are revolving around women and the home front in some way. Just thinking of some other things. What else could it be? It could be things that transpire that have a positive impact on your emotional well-being in some way. Maybe, who knows, maybe over this time there will actually be an opportunity. It's depending on where you live. Where I live, we're still in lockdown. So, but maybe, there will be an opportunity to gather in some capacity with family members, and that feels nice, and there's nice conversation, and that kind of thing that goes on. So that gives you some ideas, but very much the focus here in this Gemini, all this Gemini transits, the focus is on your 4th house. So home, family, place of living, emotional security, that kind of thing. All right, so we're going to move on to Aquarius now. Aquarius, for you, we've got the Gemini extravaganza happening in your 5th house, which has to do with children. So it could be your children or children you're associated with or work with in some way. All things surrounding, children, childbirth, child rearing, parenting. It can have to do with pregnancy as well, which I didn't mention there. It can have to do with your hobbies, special interests, even sports that you enjoy, those kinds of activities, your creative projects fall into the 5th house. All those things that kind of give us the warm fuzzies in a sense, or make us feel special and joyful. and allow us to, like, it's the fun we have in life. That's the fifth house. Pleasure. What brings us pleasure? So this is where all of this Gemini, all of this activity in Gemini is transpiring for you, is in the fifth house. And so, I mean, this can be some really nice interactions with children or about children. It can be, I can see this like as being like, a kid who really, like, their speech starts to take off during this transit, and it gives you the warm fuzzies, right? It is beautiful communications, like I think of like poetry and music being, crafted during this transit that can really, really be lovely and really have this sense of aesthetic and drawing people in, of making people feel comfortable and, that energy of Venus and Gemini together being like like I was saying, the smooth talker kind of thing. So I can see that revolving around some kind of like creative project. I can, this is a good time to have conversations, like difficult conversations with your kids, if that's something that is needing to happen for you, or about kids in general, or some kind of contract revolving around a creative project, potentially. It can be a time when you could meet somebody and have really good conversation, and just really have this easy flowing kind of social dynamic, meeting somebody through a hobby or something you do for pleasure, potentially. But those themes of pleasure can really go quite smoothly. It reminds me of like going on a date with somebody and who you don't really know that well, or it could be like first dates, or like you're in the early stages of a relationship, and it really flows well, right? The communication flows. And what I will say about that is, if that applies to you in some way, great. Just be mindful of the fact that this might be, you want to make sure that it's not just on the surface level. It's not superficial, right? Because Venus in Gemini can be the sweet talker that can kind of, but there may not necessarily be substance there. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So, okay, I think that gives you something to go on, Aquarius. So that's, those fifth house themes are what's really being triggered for you. We're going to move to Capricorn now. Capricorn, for you, Gemini Palooza is happening in your sixth house. So Mercury, Venus, there, Mercury's going to retrograde there. The eclipses are on that axis. The sun is moving in there. So much activity happening in the Gemini house. And for you, that's your sixth house, which has to do with your health and well-being, and your daily grind, the tasks you do on the day-to-day in your job, whether that be paid or unpaid, your daily work, your daily habits and routine. You're checking off the ticky boxes kind of thing, I like to say. And this can have to do with pets as well. And so with all this activity, there's likely to be a lot of communication and conversation around those themes, but it can be quite, beneficial in some way, and pleasant, and like you can have conversations with like say, for example, you're dealing with a health issue, or there's some reason that you're having to have conversations with health professionals, for example, then you could like meet somebody that you really click with, or that it goes well, right? It goes smoothly. This could be like, if you're going to adopt a pet, then it could be nice energy for that as well. You know, you meet somebody that's really, you feel really good about working with, in terms of like, you know, if you're adopting a pet, or you know, buying a purebred of some description or something like that. This can be a good time to work on like some kind of contracts, agreements that have to do with subordinates, for example. So if you're somebody that has employees, you know, it's a good time for those kinds of negotiations and conversations. It is, I can see it as being a good time for working on your health and even your mental health, because we're talking about both Mercury and Venus in your 6th house in Gemini, and that is the house of health, right? And it's on that axis of health and well-being. And so I can see this being a good energy for that, for working on your health and including your mental health at this time. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there for you, Capricorn. And, you know, so it's those 6th house themes that we talked about that are really getting this like highlighted over this Gemini, all of this activity in Gemini for you. And there are changes happening here because of the eclipses, right? There's an eclipse story unfolding for you in relation to that 6th house and the 12th house. So that axis of health, but also of, you know, the daily grind versus your rest and recovery and retreat, which is the 12th house. I'm simplifying things here, but there's some changes going on here, you know, with those eclipses happening for sure. And but Mercury and Gemini combined Mercury and Venus combined in this sign over this next little while. I think it's nice energy for, you know, something more pleasant to transpire in regards to those themes. Okay, so next we're moving on to Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, for you, this is happening in your 7th house. So this is your house of personal relationships. The 7th house speaks to our one-to-one close personal relationships, right? So whether that be our significant other, or close friends and family members, or business partnerships, the 7th house is about contracts and agreements. And so, you know, with all of this energy going on in this 7th house, there's likely to be a lot of maybe socializing on a one-to-one kind of basis that can be quite pleasant. There can be contract negotiations taking place, you know, and conversation around that can go, you know, smoothly. Although, you know, when Mercury's retrograding there, it may take a little back and forth kind of thing to get things just so. But, you know, this can be a time where you meet somebody or you encounter somebody that is a real smooth talker, or is really feeling like, makes you feel comfortable, you know, just knows how to say the right thing, for example. Somebody that you find attractive because of their capacity to, you know, they have a way with words, or they're, you know, because of their mind even. I keep hearing this word. I don't know what it is, but it's come into my awareness so many times over the last week. and I'd never heard the word before. And it's sapiosexual, I think is the word. And it basically means like you're attracted to somebody's mind, right? You're attracted to their intellect. And so that's fitting. That's fitting in this scenario with this going on in your 7th house. And so that may be what's going on for you, or there may be an opportunity there in regards to that. Or somebody may be attracted to you for that reason. You know, and then all those other things that I mentioned. But the focus here is your 7th house, definitely your 7th house of relationship and contracts and agreements. So, you know, the 7th house also can be about our rivals, and it's like the people we know we're in competition with. And so I can see this as being a time of even like friendly competition, with Venus and Mercury both there. So that's a possibility as well that I hadn't mentioned yet. All right, so we're going to move on to Scorpio now, where Scorpio, this is happening in your 8th house. So all of this Gemini, like the focus on Gemini is happening in your 8th house. Venus, Mercury's going to retrograde, the North Node, the eclipse, you know, the sun moving into Gemini on the 20th. All of these things are highlighting your 8th house. And that is the house that has to do with other people's resources. So things like mortgages, wills, inheritance, bursaries, loans, debt, taxes, insurance, business, like clients, you know, money that comes through clients. So these kinds of things, very much. The 8th house is your intimate entanglements with other people in general, right? So we're talking like intimacy, you know, but not just, physical intimacy, like psychological intimacy as well. Or, you know, the vulnerable things in life are very 8th house. The 8th house speaks to our psyche, right? Our deep psyche and the skeletons in the closet and that kind of thing. So this is where all this energy is happening for you. And so this can actually be a really good time for things like renegotiating a mortgage, for, you know, if you got some tax stuff going on, for having good conversations around that. This can be, this can have to do with connecting with somebody, like some sort of a therapist, for example, who you really click with, and you're really able to have some good rapport with, you know, because I mean, not all therapists or healers are created equal, right? I mean, I'm somebody that has done quite a bit of therapy, I'm not ashamed to say, and there have been therapists that I have just not like clicked with. I've encountered a couple of therapists who I felt like I was the one sitting in the therapist chair, like, you know, meaning I was more of the therapist to them than they were to me. And then I've had a couple that I've really clicked with. And so it can be an opportunity where, you know, if that's something that you're going through or you want to do, it can be a good opportunity for that to happen as well. But you know, I like another thing I think of, like I was mentioning to you, that other people's resources is 8th house. And so if like for whatever reason, there's some kind of like inheritance stuff going on for you, you know, sometimes you hear horror stories about how this kind of thing goes in families. And I see this as being a time when those conversations can be actually can go more smoothly. There may be having to, like with the Mercury retrograding there may be some back and forth that has to go on, some reviewing and all of that. But overall, I can see it as being something that goes smoothly overall. So, okay, I think I'm going to leave that there for you, Scorpio, and I'll move on to Libra now, where we have this energy of all the stuff in Gemini happening in your 9th house, right? So Mercury and Venus there, they're going to meet up. Mercury's going to retrograde in Gemini. We have the sun entering Gemini on the 20th. We have the eclipses happening on that axis. So May 26th, an eclipse in Gemini's opposite sign of Sagittarius. June 10th, an eclipse in Gemini. The North Node's in Gemini. So Gemini Palooza, as I was saying, happening in your 9th house. And this speaks to things. So long distance travel is one of the topics that the 9th house covers. Foreign people and places, foreign cultures. Sort of armchair travel, meaning, you can learn about different wisdom traditions or different cultures through reading books, watching movies, documentaries, having conversations, online webinars, this kind of thing. So, and it also very, like, it has to do with teaching and learning, but not so much, we're not so much talking about like elementary school, high school kind of thing. We're talking more about college, university, or anything that you're learning that's kind of beyond the foundations or beyond the basics of things, right? It has to do with getting your message out. It has to do with that the search for meaning and the bigger picture things, like our worldview and our philosophy, that sort of thing. Justice as well. So those are all themes that are potentially being triggered with all of this energy going on in Gemini. And so in a practical sense, like, what could this look like for you? Well, this could be potentially a lot of conversation going on and negotiation going on in terms of planning travel. And it can feel, nice and pleasant and fun. It can have to do with working on some sort of publication, or project involving something that you want to publish, that there could be some contract negotiations going on as far as that goes, that go smoothly. Or there can be, you find the right words, pleasant words. There can be, like, if you're involved in some sort of higher education, this can be like you have to like defend a thesis, for example. It can go quite well, right? There may be some sort of like going over things and like back and forth because Mercury is retrograding there, but you can find the right words and have the right conversations there. This can be having some conversations that have to do with your worldview, your perspective, that that maybe like you're able to articulate that in a way that lands nicely for other people, or vice versa. Somebody comes into your sphere that has the capacity to really get the point across in a way that is, non-confrontational, and maybe makes you go, okay, I hadn't thought about it like that, right? And allows you to shift your perspective in some way. So, If you have something to learn around this time, like, say you start a new job and you have to learn like new technology, for example, or a new system of some description or a new philosophy. Your company's got a new, like it has a, what do you call it? Like a mission, vision sort of statement, or you're learning the culture of a new institution. This can be helpful for that. This energy can be helpful for that, and like good rapport, good communication happening there. It can be something that, again, overall, like there may be some having to go back and forth and review because Mercury will retrograde in Gemini, but overall it can be a more pleasant experience. So, okay, I think that's good for you, Libra. I'm going to move on to Virgo now. Virgo, for you, this Gemini Palooza happens in your 10th house. So Mercury, Venus, North Node, eclipses, Sun moving in there, Mercury retrograding, all the things are happening in your 10th house. And this is the house that has to do with your career, your public reputation and persona, your public life in general. It has to do with the legacy that you wish to leave. It has to do with your relationship to authority figures and your own authority. So these are all 10th house themes. So if you're a Virgo rising and you have this happening in your 10th house, it's a time when you have the capacity to communicate to a wider audience in a way that is pleasant, that comes across as pleasing. If you're negotiating something career-wise, this is a good energy to do that under. There can be some nice conversations around that. If you're looking for a promotion, this can be good energy for that. If you are somebody that is going public with something in some way, like announcing a political candidacy or something like that. I don't know why that just came to mind, but or just announcing something more public, then this can be good energy for that, definitely. This can have you meeting people through your career in some way that, it makes you feel welcome, or there's a welcoming atmosphere, a pleasing atmosphere, good sort of easy flowing conversation, that kind of thing. If you have to schmooze the boss for some reason, this is good energy to do that under. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, well, if there's something going on where there is, you have to have some conversations with authority figures, like father figures, or some kind of authority, this can be a good time for that as well. So I think that gives you plenty to go on. As a Virgo rising myself, I'm obviously getting ready to launch a new website. So that's pretty public. And I guess sort of presenting myself as more of an authority in a sense. My new website is astrologymaven.com. So that just gives you an example, real life kind of example of the kinds of things that I'm talking about here for if you're a Virgo rising as well. So, okay, we're going to move on to Leo now, where Leo, this is happening in your 11th house. So you have Gemini Palooza in the 11th, right? Which is Mercury, Venus. Mercury will retrograde. The sun's moving in there. The eclipses are happening there. And, so just all kinds of energy going on in your 11th house, which has to do with your friendship groups or the group at large, like meaning associations, organizations, clubs, networks, that kind of thing, online communities even, very much about allies, you know, and alliances that you make and people that are willing to help you get where you want to go, people that are wanting to help you reach your hopes and dreams for the future. So that's where all of this, you know, those are the themes that are being triggered for you. And so this is really nice because there can be a lot of pleasant communication that goes on, and beneficial communication that goes on in terms of those, you know, the group in general. A lot of connections. I can see this as you, like, you being like the person who's bringing a lot of these pieces together, or maybe different factions or different organizations or different friends, like connecting the dots in some way, right? This is just pleasant socialization, even with friends, and you know, a group in some regard. Like I said, it can even be online. This is alliances that you're able to make right now that feel easy in terms of, you know, the communication flows well. It's not too like heavy. It can be pleasing. It might involve even around resources in some description. You know, this can be like you are the hostess with the mostess in a group setting in some way. You know, I used that phrase earlier in the video. If you're bringing people together, if you are that person that's bringing people together in some way, then, you know, that can go quite well for you. But just forming alliances at this time can be good, can be pleasant, can be beneficial. There can be a lot of back and forth that goes on, and, you know, maybe some revising and such because Mercury is retrograding there. But overall, you know, lots of focus on that 11th house and changes and you know, with Venus in there for now, with Mercury, then you know, I see this as being a positive thing happening in the 11th house. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there for you, Leo. And last but not least, in this case, we have Cancer. So for you, Cancer, all this Gemini Palooza is happening in your 12th house. And so this, you know, we've got Mercury there. Mercury will retrograde in Gemini. We have Venus, as we spoke about. We've got the North Node in Gemini, which Venus will come into a conjunction with on Monday. We have the eclipses happening on that axis. We have the sun moving in there on the 20th. So much activity going on in your 12th house, which is the house of retreat. It's the house of what goes on behind closed doors. It's the house that has to do with our subconscious and, you know, even like the behaviors that we sometimes engage in that are that are self-sabotaging, you know, our bad habits or even our addictions. But it can also have to do with, like, it's anything that's kind of secret, you know, anything that's behind the wall, so to speak, behind the veil, is the 12th house. And that includes, in literal terms, places that are tucked away from the world, like hospitals, retreat centers, rehabilitation facilities, prisons, hospices, places that we go to, like, recover and rest and recuperate. You know, all those are 12th house. 12th house speaks to losses and endings as well, which, you know, as crappy as that sounds, we we need certain things to end for new things to begin, right? This is a natural part of the cycle. And so it can be when things are kind of winding down as well. So all that to say that with this energy going on in the 12th house, though, it's a good time for addressing some of these things. So, for example, it can be a really good time to tackle some bad habit maybe that you have, right? And to find the right way of communicating about that, or the right situation, like the right place, institution, whether that be a spiritual retreat center or a hospital or a rehab facility or whatever, to negotiate that, that can go well. There can be, if you're somebody that is big on, dreams, or somebody, if you're somebody that has a lot of dreams, or that's something that's really like significant or important to you in some way, or your spiritual connection and your spiritual life is something that, is relevant to you, then, it's a nice time for those kinds of things, like having conversations around that, or pleasant dreams where, maybe you're getting some insight or some messages that are coming through. I'm trying to think. There's so many things here. It's a good time. I said this to Capricorn, which is your opposite sign, but this is the axis of health. And the 12th house is more about our sort of mental, spiritual health. And so it's a good time to address that. It can be a good time for conversations around that, having conversations with yourself around that even, or private conversations about that. It can be a time where you might be the negotiator or the person who is making some kind of arrangement for another person. Say you have like an elderly parent, and there needs to be some talk about, health, like care in some way, where it's like, whether it's long-term care, or whether it's like, somebody coming into the home to provide care, or something like that, some scenario like that. This can be a good time for having those conversations. And it might be something that there's back and forth on again, because Mercury's retrograding there. But overall, there is this nice blending of energy between Venus and Gemini. So it's a good time to utilize that. All right, so I'm going to leave that there. And wow, I just said a lot of stuff today, and hopefully this wasn't too long for you. But thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. And I will catch you next week. All right, take care. Bye for now.